Okay, the origin and fate of the universe. A heady subject. So, I kind of want to talk about this because I've got a new way of looking at this that I haven't really covered in my book, A Universe. Although I have written an extra chapter that I'm going to include later about this, but let's just talk about it. Can we say anything really meaningful about the origin and fate of the universe? Something that will hold together under logical scrutiny? And yes, I think we can. And this really came about because I hear a lot of Christians continually misrepresent what is meant by the Big Bang Theory. They sort of they have this conception of that there's all this empty space, outer space without any objects in it, if you like, and suddenly into this pop goes this big bang. So they ask the question, well, where did the matter come from for the bang? Now the problem with this is they're not thinking deeply enough about the idea of the origin of everything. They've got this mental picture of endless blackness extending to infinity. And into this blackness, there's it's just nothing, but they're kind of picturing it as a nothing where time is still ticking forward, but there's nothing to exist for that time to mean anything, but it's there. So into this nothingness, this endless nothingness that is eternal, pop, comes the first particle. Let me try to deepen that picture a little bit for you. The problem is you haven't truly realized what nothingness is, because you've already invented a container for the universe as an endless carpet of black space where there is no light and no objects, and you've already invented time as something that is continually in forward motion, and you've already invented a mind, your own, that exists conceptualizing all of this. So you haven't actually invented nothing. You've actually invented colour as well, because you're seeing this as an endless darkness. But absolute nothingness is not a container for the universe. It's the absence of that container. There are no objects, there is no form, there is no such thing as time. The laws of physics have not even been invented, they don't exist. So there can't even be this physical container for space. So you can't even think of it as black, because there's no such thing as light. So how do you picture what that looks like? And the key observation is you can't picture it. Because if you could picture it, it would not be nothing, it would be a thing. It would be that endless black void of space, which is a thing in itself. You can't picture absolute nothing. So I'm going to use a term for this, and it really is just, a label. We'll call it the void. We could call it anything, but we'll call it the void, with a capital V, say. And I want to distinguish this from what you might say a void with a small v, which is just endless space, outer space with nothing in it. You can't picture it as black and you can't picture it as white, because if you do, you've already divided one thing from another. You've already got something that exists. You can't picture it as something in between the two, like a shade of grey, because that's just a third colour in addition to black and white. So no matter what way you try to wrap your head around the void resists being visualized, resists being thought about. It is a true nothing, no thing. It is no thing. You get that? So out of this, the universe comes. Now that makes a lot of sense to me, because I don't know what that void is. I just understand it as the source of everything that comes. Now, in my videos and in my book, you've heard me use the phrase the infinite. And of course, this is absolutely synonymous with the void. Just like it's synonymous with phrases like the whole, the ground of being, the absolute. You could have any number of words for it, all of which are crude approximations of this thing that we are intuiting that is beyond space-time, this thing that is the source of space-time, this thing that is absolutely non-dual, from which duality springs. So, the Big Bang Theory, when correctly understood, it reflects this. It's what's called a singularity, which means the point at which the space-time curvature becomes infinite. Now, if you don't know what I mean by curvature in relation to space-time, I recommend you read a book like Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, because space and time is curved. It is not absolute. So if you imagine, the whole universe, let's go backwards in time, let's start to bring the whole universe together. It's getting closer and closer together. All of that mass and energy is collapsing into this one tiny little point that becomes less than a point. Right? Now, it's the whole of time and space coming together here. It's not leaving behind a void. There was no void, small v. There was no outer space before there was the universe. And it's that little fact that kind of allows you to understand origin in a deeper way than just ideas like monotheism. Like, here is a God, and he looks like a human being. He's kind of got a human personality. He has ideas about good and evil. And all of this is somehow true before there's even a universe over here. So what does all this good and evil mean when this is a God who exists absolutely alone as a kind of human personality that is travelling through time? But he's travelling through time thinking, but having no one to express anything to. What is that? That doesn't make any sense. And it becomes clear to me that what religionists have done is they've taken their idea of man as a creature and imposed it upon the infinite, imposed it upon the void, imposed it upon the absolute, and they've made the absolute look like a human being. It doesn't look like a human being. And because they're seeing it in these crude terms, they can only picture it as, here was God, but whatever they mean by here, I don't know, and he created the universe over here. And he encapsulates the universe, he sees everything, he's everywhere at once, and he's all powerful, but he's completely separate from it. Well, if he's separate from it, where is he? You know what I mean? So, he can't be separate from it. Pantheism is the only view that really makes any sense, that every fibre of the universe actually is God. Now, I know that's hard to wrap your head around, but if there only was God, if there only was the infinite, then the finite has to be a part of the infinite. It can't be any other way. You know what I mean? So, occasionally a Christian will come at me and he will assume that I'm just this materialistic atheist, and they'll go, okay then, if there's no God, then where did the first particle in the universe come from? And it's like they're assuming I've never thought about this stuff, when clearly I have thought about it at a far deeper level than they ever have. You know what I mean? So I hope I'm making some kind of sense here, folks. Now the thing is, that's the origin of the universe. Before we close, let's try to say something meaningful about the fate of the universe. So, from science, we've come to understand that the universe wasn't just this static thing that always existed, like the Greeks thought. You look up at the sky and it looks like it's not moving. So you have this idea of an eternal universe that just always was. Well, we can be fairly confident that it wasn't like that, because we've been able to observe that galaxies are moving away from each other constantly. So that, the most logical, conception of the past from that is that they were all together at one point, from which we get the theory of the Big Bang. So there's a couple of theories about what happens later on. One is that you have the heat death of the universe, where all matter and energy ultimately wastes away, and there is nothing. Because we know that things like the sun is finite. It's not going to burn forever. So that's one theory. Another theory is the Big Crunch, which is that the Big Bang thrusts everything outward to some point, and then eventually it all starts pulling inward under the force of gravity, because gravity affects all planets. They're all, if the whole universe consisted of one particle and another particle that was a billion miles away, and they were both sitting static, those two particles would have to start falling together, because that is just one of those universal laws. Gravity just is. It's never been any other way. It's the thing that's holding you to the ground right now. So the Big Crunch says that everything's going to come together. Now, we don't really know whether it's going to be the Big Crunch or the heat death. Either way, the universe will return to the state it was in prior to there being a universe. So is there anything to feel pessimistic about? I don't think so. Because if the universe returns to that same state of void, well then, surely the universe is likely to happen again. It's not like anything was ever truly wasted. We came from the void, whatever that is. We return to the void. So is it not likely that we will return again from the void? And although I can't say this with absolute certainty, this has a kind of symmetry to it that I like. A kind of, we say in nature that it's cyclical. Lives are cyclical. Everything is cyclical. Does it not seem logical then that the universe itself would be cyclical? And that, every moment is now, if you want to bring something else into the equation. Therefore, it's all happening at once. This eternal and eternally changing universe that comes and goes and comes and goes. So that is the most coherent picture that I have come to accept about the universe. Now the funny thing about at least some forms of Christianity is that they want to forget about the whole universe. It's so big, but they want to forget about it. It's like, here in the physical plane, it's just some kind of training ground for a hypothetical afterworld that is on some other realm. And let's just forget about the universe. You know what I mean? It's so big, but we just forget about it. It's this fallen place that we want to get out of. Doesn't make any sense, does it? No. If life is about anything, it has to be about the here and now. It has to be about this life. This life meaning something. And if the universe does go on forever in this cyclical fashion, then nothing is ever truly lost. And this injects possibly the greatest sense of meaning into my life that I can imagine, because I don't see myself as separate from the universe. I have that non-dualist perspective where everything is me in another guise. Therefore, I will never be lost. The whole universe just goes on forever. And I know that sounds horrible to Christians because they tend to hate life. They're living with this sense of sin, this sense that life is something that we have to get out of. And they're looking for some kind of perfection in an afterlife. And, it's just a shame that they think about life in that way. I used to think about it in that way, but I don't anymore. So this allows me to enjoy life, to take it as it comes, to try to make the best of it. And when this life is over, I will be making the best of all the other lives that I live, which are everybody's lives. You know what I mean? And I know there's a lot of metaphysics going on there, and I've thrown a lot more in than I really wanted to, but if you can connect this to your own metaphysical views about everything being inseparable from everything else. It makes a lot of sense, and it adds a lot of meaning to your life. Okay, some pretty heady stuff there. Food for thought.